takes all that you've got, but he's been here, just waiting for you to knock. So take his hand and plant your feet on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock.
Hi, welcome to Life on the Rock. Tonight our guest is Brandon Vogt. He is the creator of the website strangenotions.com, and it's this place of conversation between Catholics and atheists. And there's a lot of bloggers there, and they generate a lot of discussions in the comment boxes that are, I think, leading people to the faith. So it's exciting work. And I have Father Anthony with us tonight. Doug couldn't make it in. The weather, once again, we're having snow in the south, about 3 inches yesterday, so he couldn't make it in. But good to have you, Father.
Thank you, Father Mark. It's good to be with you.
It's been a while. Last time you were here, you were doing push-ups with Justin Fatica.
Yeah. And
No,
talking to the Tripodis.
The Tripodis, yeah. So. Well, we have a lot in this opening segment. It's crammed full of stuff. And the first thing I wanted to start with is the upcoming Nun Run. Every year we try to make it out there. Last year we had the conclave going on. I couldn't make it. But March 8th, I'm going out to help our Phoenix sisters, we call them, at Tonopah, Our Lady of Solitude. They're in Tonopah, just west of Phoenix. And they're having their annual, I think it's their 5th annual Nun Run. And it's their main fundraiser for their monastery. They have a beautiful chapel there, and they just need a building around it to live in and to live their cloistered life. And you've been out there, Father, haven't you?
It's beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, and they wrote me, and I'm sorry? Yeah.
Any way that anyone can support them would be wonderful.
Yeah, you actually a big fundraiser. I remember that one year, the first year, you really generated a lot as a shadow participant. So, but they wrote, the sisters wrote and told me, said more and more people from Phoenix are going out there to pray, and it's become a real place of healing. They provide a place for priests to come and spend time, and it's a great place to renew their priesthood. People from Phoenix come and experience refreshing and renewal in their prayer life and healing. It's a place of silence, of adoration. They have a beautiful chapel with adoration during the day of the Blessed Sacrament. So the Nun Run is their main fundraising endeavor. So you can go to their website, thedesertnunrun.com, and make a donation or support the sisters, or sponsor a sister in some way. Maybe they'll walk the event, I guess. And they're expecting about 1,000 participants this year. So it's going well for them, and they have young candidates for religious life visiting them. So we want to support them in any way that we can, and know that they're praying for this network. They're praying for you all too. So they are very much a part of our family, even though they're not in Hanceville. They're starting a new foundation out in Phoenix. So any last words on that, Father? Or?
No, the desert is a beautiful place to pray.
Yeah.
I won't go there to run, but I probably should be on that event with them a little bit.
Right. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. We also have on the line Diana von Glahn. You know her from the Faithful Traveler series that is aired on the network, and has a new show. The Faithful Traveler has gone to the Holy Land, and there's a series that will be airing starting Monday. And Diana, are you there on the line?
I'm here, Father. I'm here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I was watching an episode of your new series, and it is very much full of faith. There's a lot of teaching in your work. I was impressed by the amount of information you had.
Yay! Well, you know, that's the purpose of our show. You know, to entertain and to inspire and to teach. And, you know, if you've ever been to the Holy Land, you know that there is just so much there, and it's really kind of the foundations of our faith, and there's so much to learn. So what we want to do is kind of arm people, give them the tools that they need to either make the trip themselves, or if they can't ever go, then they can, make the trip virtually by watching our show.
Right. How did the trip affect your faith?
Oh my goodness. How did the trip not affect my faith? You know, it was an amazing trip. We were blessed to go with the Philadelphia Archdiocese. Cardinal Regali was leading a trip through Select International Tours, and they asked us to go. And well, first of all, the fact that they asked us to go just was an answer to a lot of prayers, because at the time, you know, we were unsure about the future of the Faithful Traveler series, and we had just about given up on, you know, a second season, and then we got a call from Edita Krunick, who owns Select International, and she said, come with us, and we were like, no way, and and we went, and so it was wonderful. It was very difficult for me because I got sick before we went, and so I suffered physically a lot on the trip, and but you know how God kind of, a lot of times he brings you to your knees so that you can remember that you need him, you know, and I think that was very much the case for me. You know, you rely on yourself so often, you know what you're doing, and you do what you do with all the gifts that God gives you, and every now and then you forget him, you know, and I think that God wanted me very much to remember him on this trip, and because I was constantly in physical woes really made me lean on him a lot on this trip. And, you know, I talk about it in the show, especially when we were going through the Via Dolorosa, you know, just trying to, you know, there was a great parallel to how I felt. Well, I mean, how I felt was not even a drop in the bucket to how Jesus felt, you know, when he was going through there. But you know, here I am, you know, crying about my congestion and my runny nose, and, you know, and then I was like, oh, hang on, Jesus was going through a lot more, you know, so it really was a wonderful gift, that cold.
Right, it is miserable to be sick on a trip, and
oh, yeah.
But what I wondered when I was watching it was how you found, if you were on a pilgrimage, to find time to do all the shooting you did. Wasn't that difficult?
It was extremely difficult. We were blessed. You know, my husband David is one of the camera people that we brought. He came with us, and we also brought a camera person that we hired a few times for our first series. Her name is Sonia Stark, and she's fantastic. And so we were blessed to have both of them kind of, you know, covering as much of the shots as they could. But you know, things happen on every shoot. I mean, I'm sure you guys have experienced this. And just like today, we were supposed to be sitting there with you today, you know, but we got hit by Snowmageddon like everybody else did. And so, you know, flights are canceled, people get sick, things happen. You know, David, for instance, fell on the Via Dolorosa. We were walking. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and he tripped, and he fell. And, you know, thank God he was able to get up, and you know, the camera wasn't broken, but it did affect him later on in the trip. And, you know, so things happen. You just kind of have to pray that you can deal with what happens, and you do. You make do.
And do you get a lot of your information from the site itself, talking to people, or is it research you do beforehand?
Yeah, it's a variety of things. I do a lot of research beforehand. I ask as many questions as I can when I get there, and then I do a lot of research afterwards. And, you know, and then, of course, you know, EWTN vets our scripts, and they provide wonderful, useful comments, and, you know, they correct silly mistakes that I make. So, yeah, it's a huge research project. I mean, especially considering all of the places that we visited on the show. It's a 6-episode series. We go to a good majority of the places that Catholics and Christians consider holy sites in the Holy Land. And so there's a lot of information. And, you know, these places are ancient. They go back centuries, obviously, you know, to the time of Jesus, and some even to the Old Testament, you know, especially like you think about Temple Mount has Old Testament ties. So, you know, it's hard learning all that information, and you go to the Bible, and you go to people who talk about the Bible, and you read history books, and you read travel books, and, you know, you ask people who know things, and you hope that you're just getting it all right.
Right. And we want to remind our viewers that the series is available at Religious Catalog. You can purchase a copy. And thank you so much, Diana, for speaking with us.
No problem, and thank you. And, I just want to say I hope everybody enjoys the show, and, like I said, I hope it encourages people to go on their own pilgrimage. We're going to be planning our own pilgrimage for June if anyone wants to come back with us. But, if you can't go and you can just enjoy the DVD, we hope that you enjoy it, and we hope that it brings you closer to God.
All right, thank you so much. And we're going to go out with a clip from the Faithful Traveler series in the Holy Land and come back with our guest, Brandon Vogt. So don't go away. Back in a moment.
Thanks again.
What a privilege. Thanks.
I'm sitting in front of the Sea of Galilee. Let me say that again. I'm sitting in front of the Sea of Galilee. 1, 2, 3. All right! Oh, yeah, that's right. He's got something. I'm Diana. I'm here. Who's tired already? I'm tired. Welcome to the Mediterranean Sea. We're walking the Stations of the Cross right now. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning. Hey, it's good for us to be here. Let's build some churches. Let's put some tents up and let's stay here. Transfiguration is really part of this whole pilgrimage thing because we're called to be transformed ourselves. The mountain of temptation. This is where Satan took Jesus and tempted him. He said, I will give you all of this if you bow down before me. And Christ said, do not tempt the Lord your God.
Hi, welcome back. Our guest is Brandon Vogt. I think I got it right that time. Welcome.
Thank you, Father.
Now, first tell us about your day job. You have a pretty fascinating day job too.
I do, yeah, that's an understatement.
Yeah.
So about 3 months ago, I joined Word on Fire, which is Father Robert Barron's evangelistic media ministry. And so I'm the content director for Word on Fire. So I help direct and disseminate all of Father Barron's great content, like his YouTube videos, his social media, his articles. So it's been a joy the last few months.
All right, and does he have any big filming projects coming up? Or?
We do, yeah. In this June, he's going to be beginning the filming of his next epic series called Catholicism, The Pivotal Players. And he tracks 10 key figures in the life of the church, unpacking their influence and their key ideas. People like St. Augustine, St. Irenaeus, up to modern times, G.K. Chesterton, John Henry Newman. So he's got 10 of these figures, and he's traveling to all of their locales, their places of birth, their places of influence. So we're starting to film. I think the first episodes are going to roll out in 2015.
Wow, wow. But now, so you work there, but you've also started this website, strangenotions.com. And I absolutely love the title. I had no idea what it meant, but until you explained it to me. Tell us about that title.
So the website strangenotions.com is designed to be the central place of dialogue between Catholics and atheists. And so the name Strange Notions comes from that great story in the 17th chapter of Acts, where St. Paul journeys to the Areopagus, Mars Hill, and when he lands in Athens, Greece, which is where this hill is, he first evangelizes the Jews in the temple, then dialogues with the city folk in the marketplace, and then he's invited to trek up to the Areopagus and proclaim his new message of Jesus risen from the dead. And when he does, he's mostly mocked and scorned and dismissed, but some of his listeners say, "You bring some strange notions to our ears, and we want to hear more about that. Can you come back tomorrow?" And he does, and makes a few converts, Dionysius, Damaris, and one unnamed convert, and that launches European Christianity in a sense. So we wanted to take that name as kind of our mission. Strange Notions meant to be this first great meeting between Catholics and atheists where we can discuss the big questions of life.
That's a perfect title, and that I was fortunate to go there in October on a St. Paul pilgrimage, and it's overlooking the Parthenon, and you have the city behind it, and you think about, you have all this Greek civilization and philosophy, and the Christianity is encountering that there. It couldn't be more dramatic. So we have a meeting place today on the web and in social media, right, that we can engage people in such a powerful way. Tell us how your website is set up.
So Strange Notions began back in May, and we started off with about 30 different contributors. They include some of the top theologians, philosophers, scientists, and artists from around the world, not just from America. And every day at the beginning, we would post a new article from one of them on a big question of life, the existence of God or objective morality, meaning, purpose, science. We've tightened it up now to where we just post 3 times a week, but
so you're swinging for the bleachers.
That's right.
Yeah,
we wanted this to be the definitive Catholic response to non-belief, to atheism and to agnosticism. And then once the article is posted, the real action takes place in the comment boxes. So on every one of these articles, atheists and Catholics are free to agree or more often critique what was originally written, and maybe ask a follow-up question, maybe engage the content in a deeper level. So all of our articles have hundreds of comments where we have really rich and high-level discussion.
And that's the real work for you, right, is to moderate these comments?
Absolutely, yeah. It's been a big challenge. If anyone who has ventured out into the internet, especially into the secular space, knows that it's kind of a wild west, in the comment boxes. You attract a lot of vulgarity and nastiness and name calling on the internet because of its anonymity. And so we wanted this to be sort of an oasis online where people could exchange comments about these high-level issues with charity, sincerity, and respect. So we have a team of moderators who not only moderate for tone, make sure there's no name calling or nastiness or sarcasm, but also for the content. We vigorously kind of purge ad hominem attacks or straw men where you take down some misrepresentation of the other person's argument. And the result is a really high-level, fruitful conversation.
And do you find, do you actually strip out maybe some of their, if they do cross a line, you keep part of the content and just take away other parts? Or?
It varies per commenter. Sometimes we delete the whole comment, sometimes we'll adjust it. More often than not, we just give them a warning and say, this doesn't abide by our policy. Next time, let's try to do it this way and move on.
Right. And that does seem to have a lot of popularity today. You think of the whole wiki movement and this people coming together to produce content. And I find even fascinating, like if you go to Amazon.com or something to read some of their comments, you get like these, I feel like you got frustrated playwrights sometimes who just can't wait to write something,
Yeah.
And it can be very witty and very insightful. Tell us about some of the bloggers that you have, and are they writing specifically for your site, or is this just an article of theirs from somewhere else?
It's a good question. It's a mix. We do have several contributors who have sort of given us access to all the past content they've created, so past articles or videos or debates. We have many other contributors who contribute fresh content, but the great part about these topics is they're sort of evergreen. Questions about God's existence have been asked for thousands of years, and so an article written 20 years ago can easily be reposted today with just as much relevance. And then on some of them, though not all of them, the original authors are able to engage people in the comment boxes, which again makes it even more fruitful when you can ask a question of the person who wrote the original article.
Right. And what are some of the names you have writing?
So some names that I'm sure our viewers here are going to be familiar with include Father Robert Barron, Father Robert Spitzer, Dr. Peter Kraft. We have many different artists and scientists I mentioned as well. Several popular Catholic bloggers. So whenever you go to strangenotions.com, you can click on our main contributors and see a whole list of everyone who writes for the site.
Right. And what I love about, and I'm being told too, Jennifer Fulweiler's on there. And
yeah, Jen, she's a good friend, and she's one of many atheist to Catholic converts that we have writing for the site.
Yeah.
So what is magnificent about their writing is they understand the atheist mindset, you know.
Right.
Another one is a young lady named Leah Labresco, who went to Yale and is incredibly bright and was one of the top atheist bloggers on the internet, but then very publicly and surprisingly announced her conversion to Catholicism and now continues to blog as a Catholic. And so these are some of the...
also have a radio show too? Or?
She was on the radio. I don't know if she had her own show.
Yeah, but that's one thing I love about the blogosphere is that you get people that can generate real content that maybe, I mean, it used to be like, you know, you had to be in the you know, the big mainstream television stations, you know, to be on TV or whatever, to have connection with people. But now, like with Jennifer Fulweiler, and you have others too, you could have stay-at-home moms who can, you know, sit there and work in between family matters and write wonderful articles.
That's, I think, one of the greatest powers of the new media. You know, you have a 27-year-old young man who, from a dinky room in his house in Florida, can reach hundreds of thousands of people with this evangelistic message. And so it removes the gatekeepers and the barriers to evangelizing the masses, you know, and people like Fulton Sheen or St. Augustine would have given their right arms to have the power that we have with these digital tools.
Right. We have guys writing from their bunkers with a naked light bulb.
Right.
No, but I love that they have a number of, I mean, like the National Catholic Register has a number of stay-at-home moms. And it's a world we'd never hear about. The world totally passes over. They're even mocked, you know, for having a number of children. And they have this wonderful intellectual life and family life that they can share with us, reflections on very ordinary, commonplace experiences. That's what I love reading about it, because it's a world I'm not used to, but yet they can draw great theological content from raising their children, educating them in those experiences.
Yeah, it is. You know, one of the great revolutions I think that the internet brought is it brought these disconnected demographics like stay-at-home moms or homeschooling families or Catholics in the country, and now connected them with millions of other similar people around the world who, you know, 50 years ago they might never have contacted, if maybe through snail mail, but now within a couple seconds for free, they're connected to so many like-minded people and they can find support and help and community.
So you have a converted atheist that was one of the leading atheist bloggers, right? That's a pretty good trophy, isn't it?
Yeah, trophy. Yeah, we try not to see them as you know, trophies or objects, but she's a witness. You know, I always hearken back to Pope Paul VI's great adage from Evangelii Nunciandi, where he said that modern man listens more willingly to witnesses rather than teachers. And if he does listen to teachers, it's because they're witnesses. And so we could have priests or theologians all day ramble about the arguments for the existence of God, but then when you look at a witness like Aaliyah or Jennifer Fulweiler, who their life has been tangibly, visibly transformed by the grace of God, that speaks volumes louder than just the bland intellectual treatise.
And it's nice that the variation you have too is that they're speaking from different points of view and can really be answering questions that people have. I know sometimes we can get in our bunkers and answer questions that people really aren't asking, but these people are out there in the world, they're converts themselves in some cases, and it can really be relevant. And you also have I was interested in that one, you have a PhD in from Yale, a chemist, right, who blogs?
That's right. Yeah, I don't know if she went to Yale, but Stacy
Or-
Trasancos, who is another stay-at-home mom and a very bright woman, and she has a PhD in chemistry
Right.
and also a master's degree in theology. And like some of the other contributors, is a former atheist. And so you have somebody, again, who not only can appreciate the atheist worldview because she came out of it, but also has the intellectual chops to engage some of the smarter and more savvy atheist commenters that we have. So she's a great gift to our site.
And that's what I noticed, that those comment boxes, I mean, the arguments they're making, it's a heavy-duty argument. I mean, they're serious thinkers.
They are, yeah, to their credit. Many of my atheist friends are some of the brightest people I know,
Right.
but what we try to do is revive the rich Catholic intellectual tradition that can match, head-to-head, arm-to-arm with any atheist thinker you can throw at us. So we want to bring the full thrust of our tradition to the discussion.
Right. Well, we're going to take a short break, and you can tell us about, when we come back, about the numbers, the traffic you're generating, and other great initiatives you have. So don't go away. We'll be back in a moment. Okay, we're speaking with Brandon Vogt, and that is a bold advertisement there. That's right. This, you're taking on the big questions, and that traditionally has been the role of classical apologetics, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. We look back several hundred years, most of the apologists and philosophers in the church were concerned with these big questions. Who is God? How do we know he exists? Who is Jesus? How do we know that he is God? More lately, though, I think especially after the Second Vatican Council, apologetics in general has kind of fallen out of favor, but when we do it, most of the time our apologetics are geared toward Protestants, which is good, we need that, but we've kind of lost the art of natural theology, which is this theology of what we can discern using reason in the natural world about who God is, what he's like, and how he exists.
And it's so great that StrangeNotions.com, you're there, we could say, in the social media world where young people who have these questions, who are idealistic and think in big picture terms, that you're there providing answers. And really, you're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Augustine's talked about this, Thomas Aquinas, Newman and C.S. Lewis and things, right? They address these issues.
Absolutely, yeah. We're small men standing on the shoulders of great giants.
Right.
But those men, all the ones you just mentioned, in every century of the church, have understood the necessity of engaging the greatest threats to faith in their age. And I think today, more generally, it can be described as secularism, but the greatest threat to us is this sort of practical atheism, where either people admittedly don't believe in God, or they just live as if God doesn't exist. And so one of the great challenges for my generation is going to be providing good reasons to believe in God, not just because mom or dad told me, not just because it's how I was raised, but there are strong intellectual reasons to believe that a good and loving God exists.
And Paul exhorts us, right, to have reasons for our faith, to be able to give reasons, to articulate reasons.
Right.
And that, sometimes we think of that as abstract, but really that makes our faith fully human, right? If it's reasonable and there's a reason for it and things. And not to say that you can explain the mysteries fully by reason.
That's right.
But it is a start, right, to understanding God.
Yeah, Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine would be the first to say you can't know everything about God, especially the Trinity, merely by reason, but you can know many of the most important facts.
Yeah.
I love Pope John Paul II's quote where he said that faith and reason are like two wings on which we ascend to the contemplation of truth.
Right.
So like two wings of a bird, you need both.
Right.
If you only have faith, you drift into this fideistic sort of belief where you're just believing on a lark without any good reason or proof. And if you're too rational, you lose the deeply powerful experiential and faith-filled aspect of the Catholic tradition. So we need both, and we need to make sure that we're presenting that to especially our young people.
Now you're 27 years old, you're married, you have 3 kids, 1 on the way, and you're a convert to Catholicism, but you're not that far out of college. What are the pressures out there against our young people that you see, that you hear about?
I think especially in the college atmosphere. I mean, I hear this all the time from parents and grandparents who will send me emails or messages saying, my child was raised as a Catholic, they went to Mass every Sunday, we put them through Catholic school, but then they went off to college and they took this philosophy class or this class on the Bible, which engaged the historical critical method. And then they came home and they said, I no longer believe in God. And so this 20-something age seems to be the age when the largest percentage of our young people fall away from the faith. And it's mainly for intellectual reasons, I've found. So that's kind of the demographic that I think the church would do well to pour her energies into evangelizing, to meet these young and excited minds with the great intellect of our tradition.
Right. And I don't know what percentages, but certainly a fair number of teachers at a university are very secular. They seem to have a stronghold in many ways. So.
Yeah, you go into almost any secular university, science, math, or history class, and atheism is almost assumed. And so for a young person who has been surrounded by a faith atmosphere throughout school and their early life, when they enter that sort of atmosphere and aren't prepared with good reasons for their own faith, it can become sort of shattering. This is the first time they've encountered serious criticism. So they need to be prepared before they get there with, again, good arguments for God.
And I think, yeah, certainly academia has this trajectory of, the secularism. But too, I would encourage young people maybe to get to know your professors, especially those you respect. And you'll probably be surprised to find many do have a faith life and a spiritual life. I was sharing with you, I remember when I was in school the first time in studying physics, and one of my favorite professors, I would see him at Mass. And I just revered this guy. He was like just brilliant and everything. And I just remember how that spoke to me, thinking, well, this guy, smart guy, and he's at Mass, and so, just don't buy in and think the battle's lost at the university. I'm sure there's a lot of people of great faith there. But I know, Father Anthony, you've dealt with this issue before in your pastoral work.
Well, when we were discussing this before the show, I know in our generation, if somebody said they were an atheist, it was for shock value. You didn't really buy into it. Now, I'm surprised as a priest by the number of parents who are really sharing with us the concern you've expressed, that they realize their child has intellectually embraced this, which is very threatening and frightening for them. And not even having gone to just the public or secular universities, but some having gone to some very good Catholic schools, and then they get into their professional field, and all of a sudden they're reading the books that are out there and really doubting and questioning. It's frightening as a priest to hear that, because there has to be something for them to grab onto.
And that's why, again, like as I was telling Father Mark, I always encourage parents to be ready for that moment before it happens.
Yeah.
You know, and so read the literature countering some of the most popular contemporary atheists. You know, prepare yourself with good reasons for defending the existence of God. And so when that time comes, you can say, wow, you know, I had no idea you were wrestling with this, but let's talk about it. You know, what are some of the difficulties you have with believing in God? Why did your faith, how'd you make that transition from this Catholic adolescence to not believing in God? Where was the switch? And once you are well formed beforehand, you're much better prepared to have that conversation.
Sure. Absolutely.
And websites like yours, strangenotions.com, can give parents some ammunition. Right? Some
Absolutely,
arguments,
yeah. I almost every day send out the link to parents and grandparents concerned about their friends or family members. When you go to strangenotions.com, the first thing you'll see is a graphic listing 20 arguments for the existence of God. These are some of the most powerful and popular arguments through history. And so it's a great one-stop shop if you want a quick and easy defense of God's existence.
So they're not arguing with you, they're arguing with Augustine, right?
Yeah,
And so
right.
Well,
Right.
let's talk about some of the most common questions. Today, oftentimes in the media, it's faith and science are presented as opposing one another. What's the answer to that?
Yeah, the answer is no. Yeah, they're not opposed.
All right, let's stretch that out.
There's the short answer. No. Science and faith are not in conflict. In fact, they're mutually supportive. One of my good friends, Stacey Trasancos, who we mentioned earlier, just wrote a book on this very topic, that not only are these two subjects not in conflict, but science depends on the Christian worldview. Christianity, unlike many other worldviews, proposes that an intelligent God created the world and ingrained in it intelligibility so that we can know about the world. This is precisely the starting point for science, you know, to engage.
That there's an order.
That there's an order, a pattern, and intelligibility of the world.
Yeah.
Science necessitates that. And so this is why the modern scientific revolution was birthed in Christian culture and not in the Far East, not in Africa, not anywhere else in the world, not at any other period, not with the Greeks. It's because of the ground of Christianity that science emerged. So not only are they not in conflict, but science sits on the shoulders of Christianity.
Right. I think that's such a, because you hear the exact opposite if you watch television, right? You say that the people of faith are stupid and they're blind and all this kind of stuff. But our faith teaches God created out of nothingness. There's an order. Hey, man, go discover that order, right? And we see a great flowering of science. You like to point out different scientists who are people of faith?
That's right. You could tick off dozens of the greatest scientists who were not only religiously minded, but deeply devout Catholics.
Right.
So Copernicus, I believe, was a friar. You know, Newton wrote more about religion than he did about science. I looked at somebody like Blaise Pascal, the great physicist and mathematician, who, because of his belief in God, embraced the scientific endeavor. He saw it as a religious enterprise. The more I can find out about the natural world, the more I'll know about my Creator. And so his religion fueled his science rather than competing against it.
Right. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back with Brandon Vogt, so don't go away. Welcome back. Let's talk about some other questions you get on the website. What are they?
So probably the most common response that we hear on the website and offline with our atheist friends and family members is, where's the evidence for God? You know, or alternatively, there is no evidence for God. Richard Dawkins, one of the most popular atheists in the world, that's kind of his calling card. There's no evidence for God. One of the first ways I respond to this is first by asking, what do you mean by evidence? Do you simply mean good reasons to believe that God exists? Because if so, there's lots of those. Or by evidence, do you mean empirical, physical evidence for God? And if that's what you mean, then you're asking the wrong question, almost a nonsensical question. Because the God of Catholicism, of classical theism, is immaterial. He's transcendent, beyond space and time and energy and matter. And so you would never suspect by empirical searching to find God. Like, you wouldn't expect to go off into outer space and in some distant planet say, there you are, God, I found you, you know? So saying where's the empirical evidence for God is like using geology to detect Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. It's not the right tool to find the object of your pursuit. So kind of wrestling with what do you mean by that question is the first step to answering it.
And it's like in our modern culture that emphasizes like the empirical sciences, the science, you know, of measurement and physics and chemistry and stuff, that you expect God to submit to a test that we can say, yeah, like you say, there he is. And
Right.
in a certain way, God doesn't submit himself in that way to us. It doesn't seem like, but
right. It's kind of almost this intellectually arrogant position to assume we're going to put God under our microscope or under our telescopes, and we're going to experiment and measure and verify God when we're talking about the transcendent creator of the cosmos, the sheer act of being.
That's holding us in existence as we speak.
At this very moment, right.
And I think it's important too, we talked about this earlier, about that there are immaterial realities. Some people just start from this assumption that there is no, the only world that there is the material universe. But like our common experience we could say love, the love I have for a person is very real.
That's right.
And it exists, or maybe beauty or truth in some way that is just beyond the measurable, thing.
That's right.
What kind of response do you give to people like that?
Yeah, I think most people sense that there's something beyond the material world. When they have a transcendent experience of beauty, or when you look at somebody like Mother Teresa and say there's something more going on there than just serving the poor. There's some immaterial justice fueling her, some love for some transcendent being. Some non-believers, though, will push that out and they'll reject it because they don't like where the conclusion's going to take them. So many of them will just chalk that up to a mix of neurons firing randomly in your mind. But I'd challenge anybody proposing that as a solution to go home to your wife and tell her, I love you, but when I say I love you, I really just mean that's the chemical reactions in my brain that are making me say that. It's not actually an act of the will, a transcendent feeling of willing the good of you. So I think most people intuitively grasp that materialism is not a logical worldview.
Now, have you tried that with
Maybe on the street if I told her that. Yeah.
And what about suffering? We hear a lot. I've heard convert stories. Suffering brought them into the church. Why is that? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. Thomas Aquinas famously in his Summa Theologiae said that there are really two main reasons to question the existence of God. One was kind of simplicity or parsimony. He said that we don't need God because we can explain everything without him. But the second one is what we would call the problem of evil. There seems to be so much suffering in the world, so much needless pain and hurt. And if God existed as an all-good being and all-powerful, he would not let the world exist with all this suffering. The challenge, though, for the person issuing that as an argument against God would be to show how God would have no good reasons to allow suffering in the world. And that's a challenging burden for them to carry. We see up and down the history of the saints how deep suffering can produce incredible holiness. We see in our own lives how pain oftentimes makes us stronger, more virtuous, or even more loving. So there seems to be good reason for allowing some suffering. So the question is, why wouldn't God have good reasons to allow all the suffering in the world? So it's a tricky question, but not an insurmountable objection.
And I remember hearing a preacher talk about it and said that suffering is always a mystery, and that presence of evil is a mystery too. So, as the evangelists or apologists, you have to approach it humbly, and respect people in their suffering. But at the same time, the Catechism says the entire message of Christianity addresses this question of suffering and the presence of evil. and that Jesus on the cross speaks to so many people. I've read a number of conversion stories where they go into the Catholic Church, they see the crucifix, and say, well, this is a God I can relate to.
That's right, yeah. St. Paul says, I preach Christ and him crucified, you know, and it's through the crucifixion that we see God's answer to the problem of pain. He became man and took the suffering, the evil, the dysfunction of the world into himself, absorbing it and thereby defeating it. And so his answer is to suffer with us and to suffer at a degree higher than we'll ever experience, but diffuse it through his own self-giving love.
Right. And I think too, you know, for people that say, how can a good God allow this, which we all struggle with, is but to also say, well, hang on to that. Because yeah, God loves us, he's good, so he's going to draw some good out of this, right? And our scripture or faith teaches us that he can draw good out of suffering. All right, like in the pastoral approach in evangelism, you've discovered, I know you write about that sometimes there's personal issues underlying their struggle. They'll be talking about Aquinas, Augustine, whatever, and really they don't want to do X, Y, or Z in the moral life, right?
That's right, yeah. I often say that many times for non-believers or for people who have fallen away from the Catholic faith, what they pose as theological objections are often personal objections in disguise. So for instance, they might have difficulty with the church's teaching on homosexuality or abortion or contraception or any of these hot button issues. And so they mask that by rationalizing for all these intellectual obstacles that those are really what's keeping them from the faith. Because they rightly realize that if God does exist and if he came to us in the person of Jesus and established the Catholic Church and gave her authority, I'm going to have to change my life in radical ways. It's going to call something of me that I'm not ready to give. And so I'm going to have to put up all these intellectual barriers to justify my non-belief. Now, I wouldn't accuse any individual of that, and I can't psychoanalyze every non-believer, but I have found that in many cases that's been true, and I've heard of many converts who will tell me that's kind of how it was for me before I came to the Catholic faith.
And in a strange way, too, it attracts us, too, because it is demanding, the faith. And certainly young people want challenges. I got to read this quote. You have your own conversion story, and I just was struck by this quote. You said, for most of my life, I never met a rigorous God who made any sort of demand on my life. And I never encountered an intimate God who ravished me with deep love, or an epic God who warred against evil for my sake. The church I grew up in cared for me deeply, and encouraged kindness and presented the basic biblical stories to me, but I never really experienced anything transcendent. The God I grew up with was a tame lion, more cat than beast, more comfortable than dangerous. Isn't that true? We present, you quoted C.S. Lewis, we present
yeah,
God
I
as
love C.S. Lewis on this, you know, he says, most of us, you know, just want our grandfather who art in heaven, you know, who just says, you know, all the kids can go out and play and have a great time, and I just want you to be happy. But the God of the Bible is not like that. You know, he's not after happiness. He's after divinity. He wants us to become like him, to claim our roles as sons of God. So, yeah, the Catholic life is demanding, but it's a call to greatness. I think, too, of Pope Benedict XVI, who said, you were not made for comfort, you were made for greatness, and that's what God wants of all of us.
Right, and that is compelling. And you talk about the approach to an evangelization about presenting the moral teachings as a path to fulfillment. Talk about that.
Yeah, my boss, Father Robert Barron, has this great analogy where he says, if you're teaching a young person how to play baseball, you don't begin by instructing them on the intricacies of the outfield fly rule, or you don't set them up with 15 rules about how to hold the bat and get in a proper stance. Instead, you give them some gloves and a ball and tell them to go have fun, and they develop a love for the game. And after they become passionate and fulfilled through playing the game, then you can move into the deeper aspects of the rules and show how those rules and that order strengthen their enjoyment of the game. The same thing holds with the Catholic moral life. You know, I think we just have to win people over by the fruit and the results of a well-lived Catholic life, and then we can move into the intellectual justifications, the philosophical reasoning behind natural family planning or whatnot. But we can't lead with that. We got to lead with, as Pope Francis says, the joy of the gospel, the brilliance of a life lived on fire for God.
Right. And all the social media, right, has as a goal of a real encounter, person to person, right, fostering that kind of real encounter.
You're right, Father. A couple weeks ago, Pope Francis released his World Communications Day message, and he encouraged all Catholics to use the internet to create a culture of encounter. That's his great phrase. And it's true and easy to do because most of the modern digital tools are grounded on dialogue. You know, the social media are all about exchanging photos and pictures and videos and comments and building this conversational relationship.
right.
So they're designed to
Right.
accomplish this goal.
Right. You write powerfully, I think, about how the social media amplifies so many aspects of the church, you know, sparking community life and fellowship, sense of mission. And the other point you make that I think is so great is that, you know, through the social media, you're talking to people that might not ever step foot in the Catholic Church, right?
Yeah, that's so true, and I see it time and again. You know, I'll use another story from Father Barron that he likes to tell. Several years ago, he got a letter from a young atheist, 20-something atheist, and he said, "Dear Father Barron, I'm just writing to say that I grew up in a non-religious home. You know, I didn't like church, I didn't like God, I didn't like religion, but I love Bob Dylan. And I searched Bob Dylan, found your video, watched it, and I became so compelled, and after reading more of your materials, I've decided to enter RCIA. I've become convinced God exists." So there's an example of a young man that we're not going to reach in any other way except through the internet.
All right. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you, Father.
joining us and your great work. Check out strangenotions.com and read about all the stuff Brandon's talking about tonight. So I'll give you a blessing. May our Heavenly Father shine His face upon you and give you His peace. And may Almighty God bless you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We'll see you next week.